Mom, they believe him. The words cut through the 2:40 a.m. darkness like broken glass. It was my daughter, Chloe, her voice thick with panic and tears. What do you mean, honey? Who believes what? I was already out of bed, my heart hammering against my ribs as I fumbled for my keys. The sheriff, she sobbed. Mark, he threw me against the wall. I called them for help, and now I'm the one they're taking pictures of. He said I came at him with a kitchen knife, and they believe him. Mom, I can hear him in the other room. He's laughing with them. That laugh, that familiar, cozy sound of good old boys protecting their own. To understand why that sound chilled me to the bone, you need to understand what happened 10 years ago, long before Mark ever laid a hand on my daughter. 10 years ago. That's when the chill really started. It wasn't on a dark county road, it was on a bright Tuesday morning on the sidewalk outside Hayes Hardware. My grandfather built that store. My father, Tom, ran it. I was doing the books. We weren't rich, but we were proud. It was the last place in town where you could buy a single half-inch lag bolt and get a 10-minute lesson on how to fix a leaky faucet for free. Then, Robert Croft, Mark's father, decided he wanted our block for a new strip mall. We wouldn't sell. So he got his new friend, the brand new Sheriff Brody, to help him take it. It was a public safety ordinance. Eminent domain. They condemned our building for structural faults that were a complete fabrication. I remember watching Brody, not in a uniform but in a crisp polo shirt, tacking the bright orange condemnation notice to our front door. He and Robert Croft were standing by Croft's shiny black Escalade, sharing a laugh over coffee from a thermos. The same laugh I was hearing through the phone. I lost the store. We lost our home. 6 months later, I lost my father. He'd say it was pneumonia, but I knew. You can't just take a man's life's work and expect him to keep breathing. He died holding my hand, leaving me with a 9-year-old Chloe and a stack of medical bills that looked like a phone book. The day of the auction, I found my dad's old leather-bound business ledger in his empty desk. On the first page, in his elegant script, he'd written, "The Phoenix Ledger," named after our high school mascot. "Everything we built, Sarah," he'd told me once. "It's all in here." I had to start over. I moved us into a cramped apartment, took a job waiting tables, and went to the community college at night. I got my paralegal certificate, and I became obsessed. I didn't just study law, I studied them. I learned every bylaw in the county, every zoning code, every procedural requirement. I followed Robert Croft's corporate filings. I read every line of Sheriff Brody's departmental budget. I read all the fine print, because I knew, someday, men like that always overstep. They always get sloppy. I just never, ever, in my darkest nightmare, imagined they'd use my daughter to do it. My old Ford's engine whined as I pushed it to 85, the steering wheel vibrating under my white-knuckled grip. Chloe was back on the line, her voice a thin, reedy whisper. "Mom, he's telling them I'm crazy. He told them I'm unstable like you were after Dad died. He used that, Mom. He used our story against me." Bile rose in my throat. Mark had been in our home. He'd eaten at our table. He'd heard me, in a moment of vulnerability, describe the crushing weight of that first year alone, and he had filed it away, like a weapon. "He keeps looking at the cut on his arm," she whispered, her voice breaking. "It's so clean, Mom. It's a perfect, straight line, like he drew it with a ruler." Brody didn't even question it. He just asked him if he wanted a donut. A donut. I skidded into the station parking lot, gravel pinging against the car frame. The fluorescent sheriff sign above the door flickered, one F burned out. I burst through the glass doors. The air inside was stale, thick with the smell of burnt coffee and wet wool. And there it was, my past and present, colliding in a scene of pure, gut-wrenching injustice. Chloe was on a hard plastic bench against the far wall. Her face was pale and swollen, a dark line of matted blood in her blonde hair, just above her temple. Her arms were cuffed in front of her. She looked small, broken, and impossibly young. Across the room, standing by the booking desk, was Mark Croft. He was immaculate in his expensive jeans and polo shirt. He wasn't in cuffs. He was nursing a styrofoam cup, listening to Sheriff Brody with a look of mild irritation. A neat, white 2-inch bandage was wrapped perfectly around his left forearm. He saw me, and his face didn't show fear. It didn't show guilt. It hardened with annoyance. Sheriff Brody, now thicker around the middle and grayer at the temples, turned. He had the same smug set to his jaw. He didn't smile. "Sarah," he said, his voice flat. "Not Mrs. Hayes. Figured you'd be down here. Your girl's got herself in a real mess." "My girl," I said, my voice shaking with a rage so cold it burned, "has a gash on her head. Why is she in cuffs while he's getting coffee?" Brody let out a long, put-upon, theatrical sigh. "Now, Sarah, I need you to settle down. We've got a victim here." He jerked a thumb toward Mark, who was watching me with cold, dead eyes. "Young Mark says Chloe came at him with a 10-inch bread knife. He's got a defensive wound to prove it." "A defensive wound?" I looked at the purple, hand-shaped bloom on Chloe's neck. I looked at her swollen eye. "You call that a wound?" I snapped. "Look at my daughter. She's half his size. You didn't even call an ambulance for her, did you? That's protocol, Sheriff. Head trauma protocol." That was my first mistake. Showing him I knew the rules. His eyes went flat. Robert Croft had obviously already called him. The good old boy network was in full effect. "Ma'am," he said. And the ma'am was an insult. "I understand you're emotional. You've always been a bit high-strung, haven't you? Ever since Tom passed." He was using it, just like Mark, weaponizing my grief, my 10-year-old grief. "Mark's father," he continued, his voice hardening, "is a pillar of this community. We go way back. Now, this is a simple domestic dispute, and frankly, it's Mark's word against hers. And he's the one making a whole lot more sense right now." He took a step toward me, using his gut to crowd my space. "So I need you to settle down," he said, his voice dropping to a low threat. "Or I'm going to have to ask you to leave. And if you keep interfering, I'll add obstructing an investigation to your girl's charges." I looked past his shoulder, at the cheap plastic nameplate on his desk. Sheriff B. Brody. 10 years ago, that nameplate was on a clipboard as he padlocked the door to my father's store. This was it, the moment. He was right. I was emotional. I was filled with a white-hot, patient rage I had been nursing for a decade. He thought I was the same broken woman he'd dismissed all those years ago. He thought I was still just Sarah. He had no idea that for 10 years I'd been reading the fine print. He was counting on me to yell. He was waiting for me to be hysterical. So I did the one thing he didn't expect. I took a deep, shuddering breath. I stopped shaking. I made my voice as calm and flat as a winter lake. "Okay, Sheriff. Okay, you're right. Let's just follow procedure." He smirked. He'd won. He'd tamed the crazy lady. "Atta girl. Now, if you'll just have a seat." "Actually, Sheriff," I interrupted, my voice still quiet. "Before I go, I'd like to file a witness complaint." "Against you." Brody's smirk vanished. "What did you say?" A young deputy at a computer in the corner who I hadn't even noticed looked up. His eyes were wide. "I'd like to file a formal complaint," I repeated, "that you are in direct violation of the County Domestic Violence Protocol. Section 4, subsection A. You're required to separate the parties immediately. My daughter, the victim, is cuffed on a bench, and the alleged assailant is—" "What?" "Getting a refill." Brody's face turned a dull, angry red. He pointed a thick finger at the young deputy. "Evans, get her girl ready for transfer to county. Now." This was it. The ticking clock. Once she was in that van, she was in the system. It would be 100 times harder to get her out. Deputy Evans stood up. He was a kid, maybe 22. He looked at me, then at Brody, then at Chloe. He was scared. He started walking toward my daughter. As he passed me, he didn't make eye contact, but he whispered, so low I barely heard it, "Ma'am, I don't like this. He's already called the van. You've got maybe 20 minutes max before she's in the system. If you have anything to stop this, now is the time. I can't do anything, but I am a witness." Deputy Evans's words hung in the stale air. A witness, that's all I needed. My panic evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, sharp focus. 10 years of study, 10 years of waiting, all clicking into place. Brody thought he was dealing with a hysterical mother. He was about to find out he was dealing with his own worst nightmare. 20 minutes, I said, my voice flat. Fine. I turned to Brody, who was looking impatient. You won't even let me speak to her? For 60 seconds? To make sure she's coherent? Or is that against your go-way-back protocol too? Brody sighed, annoyed. He wanted me gone. Fine. 60 seconds, Sarah. Then you're out. Evans, go with her. Make sure she doesn't pass her anything. Evans nodded, his face pale. He unlocked the cuff from the bench but left Chloe's hands bound. He walked her 3 feet to where I was standing. I didn't hug her right away. I put my hands on her shoulders, forcing her to look at me. "Chloe, listen to me. Are you hurt anywhere else? Did he do anything else?" She was trembling, her eyes wide with a terror that went beyond the gash on her head. "Mom," she whispered, her eyes darting to Mark, then back to me. He said he'd ruin me. He said he has. Pictures. Videos. He said his dad would. Shh, I said, pulling her into a hug, my body shielding my words from the room. My mouth was right at her ear. I could feel Evan standing right behind me, listening. "Don't worry about that. Listen to me. The key," I whispered, so low it was just a breath. "The key. Where is the key?" For a second, she tensed. Then I felt a shudder pass through her. She understood. The key was our code, ever since she was little. It meant the one piece of information, the one thing that unlocks everything. She pulled back just enough to look at me, her eyes clearing for a split second. She whispered back, her voice desperate. "My laptop, in my car, the file, he called it the Phoenix Ledger." My blood went cold. He'd used my father's name. He bragged about it. She rushed, the words tumbling out. All the money he was skimming from his dad's new development. He thought I was too stupid to understand. He thought it was funny, he said. He said it was his insurance policy against his own father. "Time's up, Sarah," Brody called out, bored. I squeezed Chloe's arms. "It's going to be okay, I promise you. It ends tonight." I let Evans lead her back to the bench. I turned and walked straight to the front door. "See? That wasn't so hard," Brody said, turning back to his coffee. I didn't answer. I walked out into the cold night air, to Chloe's little blue sedan. The key was in my bag, a spare she'd given me. I grabbed the laptop from her passenger seat, walked back inside, and placed it gently on the booking counter, right in front of Sheriff Brody. He looked at the laptop, then at me. "What's this? You bringing her homework?" "That's my daughter's computer," I said, my voice calm. "And I think you're right, Sheriff. This is a simple domestic. It's his word against hers, and I'm worried about her. She's been unstable. Writing things, making threats." Mark, who had been looking smug, suddenly looked interested. He stepped closer. Brody raised an eyebrow. "What kind of things?" "She has a file on here," I said, looking Brody dead in the eye. "She's obsessed. She calls it the Phoenix Ledger. It's basically a diary, full of paranoid delusions about Mark, about his family, about you." Brody and Mark shared a look, a flicker of, was it amusement, greed? "A diary," Brody scoffed. "And what? You think I'm going to read her diary? That's not evidence." "It is if it proves her state of mind," I pushed. "It shows she's erratic, that she's capable of attacking him just like he said. It's full of crazy stories about Mark's father. And about you. And some zoning deal. Just paranoia. It'll help your case." Mark was practically vibrating. "Open it. I want to see what she said." Brody held up a hand. "Now hold on. I can't just go. Phishing in a computer, Sarah. That's procedure." "But it's my computer." I lied, my heart pounding. "She's a minor." "Wait, no, she's 19. But she lives with me. It's my property. I'm giving you, a sheriff's officer, my consent to look at this evidence. To help your victim, Mark." Brody was hooked. The idea of seeing what Chloe knew about him and Croft was too tempting. He was arrogant. He thought he was untouchable. And he saw a way to lock this up, nice and tidy, and get a little bonus blackmail material on the side. "Fine," he grunted. He picked up the laptop, carried it over to his desk, and plugged it in. "Evans, you stay here. Watch them." He sat down, his back to me. "What's the password?" "Try Croft Family 1, I said. He typed. The computer unlocked. Of course. She was still a teenage girl in love, even as she was building a case against him. We watched his back. We saw his shoulders tense. He clicked. He scrolled. For a full minute, the only sound in the room was the click, click, click of the mouse wheel. Mark started to look nervous. "Brody," Mark said. "What is it?" Brody didn't answer. He just kept scrolling. Then, he slammed the laptop shut. The sound was like a gunshot in the tiny, silent room. He stood up slowly and turned around. His face was no longer red. It was a waxy, sickly white. This is irrelevant," he stammered. "This is financial documents. This has nothing to do with—" "It's a complete ledger, isn't it?" I said. My voice wasn't shaking anymore. It was as cold and hard as the tile floor. "Of all the money Mark has been systematically embezzling from his father's company for the last 6 months. The same company that got the corrupt zoning deal that bankrupted my family." Mark lunged. "Not at me. At the desk. You bitch! Give me that!" He never made it. Deputy Evans, who had been standing by the wall, moved faster than I'd ever seen a man move. He intercepted Mark midair with a tackle that sent him crashing into a filing cabinet. "Sheriff Brody," I said. My voice was loud now, sharp, commanding. Brody was frozen, staring at me. "Sheriff," I repeated, "you just accessed a private, password-protected financial document which I explicitly identified to you as a diary containing evidence on an unsecured computer without a warrant. You did it after the owner of that laptop was in your custody. You did it without her consent, per County Procedural Code 9-4B, which I know you've never read. That is evidence tampering. A Class 4 felony." Brody opened his mouth. A little goo sound came out. "And," I said, pointing to the young deputy who was now pulling Mark to his feet, "your officer, Deputy Evans, he just witnessed all of it." My feet felt like lead, like I was trying to run underwater. Every step toward that booking desk was a fight against a thick, invisible current of dread. I didn't go to Chloe. Not yet. If I went to her, I would be a mother. I would fall apart. And I knew, in that room, standing under those humming fluorescent lights, falling apart was a death sentence. So I went straight to the man in charge. I stopped a foot from the desk. Sheriff Brody didn't look up. He was stirring a styrofoam cup of coffee, the little red plastic stick tapping against the rim. Mark saw me. He didn't flinch. He didn't look guilty. He just watched me. Like I was a mild inconvenience, like a fly buzzing at the window. "Sheriff Brody," I said. My voice came out cracked. I cleared my throat and tried again, firmer. "Sheriff Brody." He looked up, slow. No surprise, just annoyance. "Sarah, figured you'd be down here. Your girl's got herself in a real mess." "Your girl. Not Chloe, not the victim. Your girl." He'd already drawn the lines. It was us versus them. And he was them. The acrid smell of that burnt, bitter coffee hit me, and for a second, I wasn't in the station. I was on the sidewalk outside my father's hardware store 10 years ago, watching Brody and Robert Croft, Mark's father, share a laugh over a thermos. The exact same smell. The smell of my life falling apart. "My girl," I said, and my voice was shaking. I hated it. I hated that I was shaking. "My girl has a gash on her head. She has a concussion. Why is she in handcuffs?" Brody held up a thick, beefy hand. The "stop right there" gesture. It was a gesture meant for unruly children, for dogs, for hysterical women. Whoa. Settle down, ma'am." "Ma'am." The word was a slap. He'd known me for 20 years. I'd babysat his kids. We'd been in the same checkout line at Costco. Now I was, "Ma'am." I was a problem to be handled. I watched his eyes. They weren't angry, they were bored. This was paperwork to him, an inconvenience he had to clear before his shift ended. "I understand you're emotional," he said, like a diagnosis, like he was reading from a chart. This is a difficult situation for a mother. I get that, but we've got a victim here." He jerked his thumb at Mark. Mark, who was now examining his perfect, clean bandage with a look of manufactured pain. "A victim," I snapped. "Are you blind? Look at her. Look at her face." I pointed to Chloe, who was hunched on the bench, her small shoulders shaking. "She's half his size. You didn't even call an ambulance for her, did you?" "That's protocol, Sheriff. Head trauma protocol." That was a mistake. I knew it the second I said it. I'd shown him I knew the rules. His eyes went flat. The boredom was gone. Now it was something else. A cold, hard shutting down. He didn't like being told the rules by Sarah. He let out a long, put-upon, theatrical sigh. He picked up his coffee, took a long, slow sip. Show, don't tell. He was showing me how little I mattered, how little my panic mattered. He was showing me he had all the time in the world. "Now, Sarah," he said, setting the cup down with a wet ring on the desk. "I've been doing this job for 22 years. I think I know protocol." He clapped Mark on the shoulder, a friendly, fatherly gesture. "Mark here," he said, "is the one with a knife wound, a defensive wound." He said the words like they were capitalized. He says Chloe came at him with a 10-inch bread knife. He was just trying to protect himself. He's lucky it wasn't worse. A bread knife. Chloe. My Chloe, who cried when she saw a dead bird on the road. The story was absurd. It was designed to be absurd. It was a power play, a story so ridiculous that only someone with power could make it stick. I looked at the purple hand-shaped bloom on Chloe's neck. I looked at her swollen eye, a defensive wound. The words echoed in my head. This is a simple domestic," Brody continued, leaning back in his chair, which squeaked in protest. He was comfortable. He was in his castle. And frankly, it's Mark's word against hers. And he's the one making a whole lot more sense right now. She's hysterical. He laced his fingers behind his head, getting even more comfortable. "And you know," he said, his voice dropping, "Mark's father, Robert, he and I go way back. You know that. Robert Croft is a pillar of this community, a job creator. He's concerned about your girl, about her, stability." There it was, the go way back, the pillar of the community, the same pillar that had used eminent domain to bulldoze my father's hardware store to build a strip mall, the same job creator who'd put my father in an early grave. And now they were concerned I'd make a fuss. "You've always been a bit high-strung, haven't you, Sarah?" he said, his voice laced with false sympathy. "Ever since Tom passed, Robert was just saying he was worried about you, about the stress you've been under. It was a calculated, brutal attack. He was using my grief, my 10-year-old grief. He was painting me as unstable, and by extension, my daughter. He was building his case right here in front of me. He was telling me in 100 different ways that I had no power here, that my truth didn't matter." He stood up then. He used his gut to crowd my space, forcing me to take a step back. He was close enough now that I could smell the donut on his breath, sweet and greasy, under the bitter coffee. "So, I'm going to say this one more time. I need you to settle down." He jabbed a thick finger toward my face. "This is an active investigation, and if you keep interfering, I'll have to ask you to leave. And if you still keep interfering, I'll add obstructing to your girl's charges. Do you understand me?" This was the moment, the breaking point. He was waiting for me to yell. He was daring me to cry. He wanted me to prove him right. To be the hysterical, high-strung woman he and Robert Croft had dismissed 10 years ago. I looked past his shoulder, at the cheap, plastic nameplate on his desk. Sheriff B. Brody. 10 years ago, that nameplate was on a clipboard as he padlocked my father's store. And in that second, something in me snapped. Not into pieces, it snapped into place. The shaking in my legs stopped. The heat in my chest turned to ice. He was right about one thing. I had been under stress. The stress of waiting 10 years for a moment just like this. He thought he was dealing with Sarah. He had no idea I was the one person in this county who had read all the fine print. He was counting on me to yell. He was waiting for me to cry, to prove him right. So I did the one thing in the world he didn't expect. I took a deep, shuddering breath. I let it out slowly. The shaking in my legs stopped. The heat in my chest turned to a hard, cold knot. I looked him dead in the eye, and I let my face go utterly, terrifyingly calm. "Okay, Sheriff, you're right. I'm emotional," I said, my voice flat, all the life drained from it. Let's just follow procedure. You have to do your job." Brody's shoulders relaxed. He smirked. He'd won. He'd tamed the crazy lady. "Atta girl, Sarah. Now, if you'll just have a seat in the waiting area." "Actually, Sheriff," I interrupted. My voice was still quiet, but it cut through the hum of the fluorescent lights. "Before I go, I'd like to file a witness complaint." "Against you." The smirk vanished. His face went rigid. "What did you say?" Across the room, the young deputy who had been pretending to type looked up, his eyes wide. Mark, who had been leaning against the wall, stood up straight. I'd like to file a formal written complaint, I repeated, enunciating every word, that you are in direct violation of the County Domestic Violence Protocol, Section 4, Subsection A. You are required to separate the parties immediately to prevent intimidation. My daughter, the victim, is cuffed to a bench, and the alleged assailant is— What? Getting a refill on his coffee. Brody's face turned a dull, angry red. He pointed a thick finger at the young deputy. Evans, get her girl ready for transfer to county, now. This was it. The ticking clock. He was going to bury her in the system. Once she was in that van, she was gone, and this would become 100 times harder. Deputy Evans stood up. He was a kid, maybe 22, with a face that hadn't yet hardened. He looked at me, then at Brody, then at Chloe, and I could see the conflict, the fear. He hated this. He hated his boss, but he was scared. He started walking toward my daughter. As he passed me, he didn't make eye contact. He kept his face blank and leaned in just slightly, as if to brush past my shoulder. He whispered, so low I barely heard it. Ma'am, I don't like this. He's already called the transfer van. You've got maybe 20 minutes max before she's in the system. If you have anything to stop this, now is the time. I can't do anything. But I am a witness. He kept walking. A witness. 20 minutes. That's all I had. I turned back to Brody, who was watching me with pure hatred. His little kingdom had been challenged. You won't even let me speak to her, I asked, letting a little of the hysterical mother creep back into my voice. It was a performance now. For 60 seconds? To make sure she's coherent? Or is that against your go-way-back protocol, too? Brody let out an exasperated puff of air. He wanted me gone. Fine. 60 seconds, Sarah. Then you're out of this station until booking. Evans, go with her. Make sure she doesn't pass her anything. I mean it. Check her pockets. Evans nodded, his face pale. He unlocked the cuff from the bench, but left Chloe's hands bound in front of her. He walked her 3 feet to where I was standing. I didn't hug her right away. I put my hands on her shoulders, forcing her to look at me. Her eyes were wide, glazed with a terror that went beyond the gash on her head. Chloe, listen to me. Are you hurt anywhere else? Did he do anything else? Mom, she whispered, her eyes darting to Mark, who was watching us like a hawk. He said he'd ruin me. He said he has. Pictures, videos, on his phone. He said his dad would. Would. Shh, I said. I pulled her into a hug, my body shielding my words from the room. My mouth was right at her ear. Evans was standing so close I could feel the heat from his arm, but he was looking at his boss. The key, I whispered, so low it was just a breath. The key. Where is the key? For a second she tensed. She didn't understand. Mom, what? The key, Chloe. The thing that unlocks it. You know what I'm talking about. Anything. Then I felt a shudder pass through her. She understood. The key was our code, ever since she was little. After her dad died, it was the game we played. What's the key, sweetie? What's the one thing that will make this better? Sometimes it was ice cream. Sometimes it was just a hug. She knew. She pulled back just enough to look at me, her eyes clearing for a split second. She whispered back, her voice desperate. My laptop, in my car, the file. He called it the Phoenix Ledger. My blood went cold. He'd used my father's name. He bragged about it. She rushed, the words tumbling out. All the money he was skimming from his dad's new development. He thought I was too stupid to understand. He thought it was funny. He said it was his insurance policy against his own father. My father's Phoenix Ledger was his record of every kindness, every debt paid, every person who'd helped him. Mark Croft had twisted it into a record of his own crimes. Time's up, Sarah, Brody called out, his voice booming. Get her back on the bench, Evans. Evans gently touched Chloe's arm. I squeezed my daughter's shoulders, hard. It's going to be okay, I said, loud enough for the room to hear. I promise you, it ends tonight. I let Evans lead her back to the bench. I turned and walked straight to the front door. I didn't run. I didn't look back. See? That wasn't so hard, Brody said to my back, his voice dripping with smug satisfaction. He thought he'd won. He thought I was leaving, defeated. I didn't answer. I pushed open the glass door and walked out into the cold night air, the gravel crunching under my feet. I walked to Chloe's little blue sedan, parked right next to my truck. The key was in my bag, a spare she'd given me months ago after she'd locked herself out. I opened her passenger side, grabbed the gray laptop case, and zipped it open. The laptop was there. I walked back inside. The room went quiet. Brody, Mark, and Evans all stared at me. I walked to the booking desk and placed the laptop gently on the counter, right in front of Sheriff Brody. A sharp, metallic click-clack snapped me back to the present. It was the sound of a key in a cuff. Sheriff Brody, seeing my silence as weakness, as me finally settling down, had given his order. "Evans," he barked, his voice full of gravel and impatience. He pointed a thick finger at my daughter. "Get her girl ready for transfer to county. Now. I want her out of my station. This is a liability." My blood ran cold. Transfer to county. I knew exactly what that meant. That wasn't just a holding cell. That was the main jail. That was a booking photo, a public record, a night in the general population, surrounded by God knows who. It was a place designed to break people. And Brody was sending my 9-year-old daughter there over a simple domestic with no investigation, all to protect his buddy's kid. This was it. The good old boy network closing ranks. The transfer van was the modern equivalent of banishment. Once she was in it, she was out of my reach. My paralegal knowledge wouldn't mean a thing. She'd just be a number. The young deputy, Evans, froze. I'd barely registered him until now. He was just part of the beige and brown background of the station. But now, he was the center of everything. He was the one holding the keys. He was a kid, maybe 22, 23 at most. He had that fresh from the academy look, his uniform still crisp, his face pale and unlined. He looked like the kind of kid who still believed in the "to protect and serve" motto on the side of his car. He also looked like he was about to be sick. "Sheriff," he stammered, his eyes darting from Brody to Chloe. We haven't even taken her full statement. The protocol says." "The protocol says you do what I tell you, deputy," Brody roared, his face turning a blotchy red. He'd been challenged, twice now, in his own kingdom. "Are you deaf? Or are you insubordinate? Get her ready." Evans flinched. His hand went to his belt, to the key ring. He looked at me, just for a second, and his eyes were full of a desperate, miserable apology. Then he looked at Chloe, who was just a small, huddled shape on the bench, her hands still cuffed in front of her. He nodded, his jaw tight. "Yes, Sheriff." He started walking toward my daughter. Every step he took felt like a hammer blow on my chest. This was it. I'd failed. I'd read all the fine print. But it didn't matter because this man, this bully, was just going to steamroll us. Evans reached Chloe. He gently touched her arm. "Ma'am," he said, his voice quiet, "I need you to stand up. We're going to move you to the processing room." Chloe looked up, her face a mask of confusion and terror. "What? Where am I going?" "She's going to county, girl," Brody called out, not even looking at them. He was already back at his desk, pouring himself another cup of that burnt coffee. "Gonna let you cool off for a night? Or two?" Evans winced. He helped Chloe to her feet, but instead of taking her to the back room, to the transfer bay, he guided her toward me. "Ma'am," he said to me, his voice all business, but his eyes telling a different story. "I need you to step over by the wall. I need to process the next of kin information." Brody grunted, not paying attention. Mark was on his phone, probably texting his father about how it was all handled. Evans led me and Chloe 5 steps away, to a small alcove by the water fountain and the vending machines. It was out of direct line of sight from Brody's desk. He stood between us and the rest of the room, his back to his boss, creating a small, temporary wall. "Ma'am, I need to confirm your address," he said, pulling out a small notepad, his hands shaking. He wasn't even looking at it. He was looking past my shoulder, at Brody. "It's 412 Oak Street," I said, my mind racing. What was he doing? He scribbled nothing. "Okay," he said, and then his voice dropped so low, it was just a rumble. "Ma'am, I don't like this. I don't like any of this. I grew up in this town. I remember your dad's store. He gave my mom's store credit when my dad got laid off from the mill. He doesn't deserve this. You don't. I stared at him. He was that Evans. Little Davy Evans. He's already called the transfer van, Evans whispered, his eyes wide with fear. It'll be here in 20 minutes. Max. Once she's on that van, she's in the county system. It's not good, ma'am. They'll put her in Gen Pop. Brody's not filing this as a simple misdemeanor. He's filing it as felony assault with a deadly weapon. My stomach dropped. He can't. There's no evidence. He's got the knife from the kitchen, and he's got Mark's statement. Evans rushed, his words tumbling out. He's not even logging your daughter's injuries. He's ignoring the protocol. He's railroading her. He looked me dead in the eye. If you have anything at all, to stop this, now is the time. You've got 20 minutes to change his mind, or, to be honest, to give me a reason to stop him. I looked at his name tag. D. Evans. Little Davy. A reason, I whispered. He'll fire you. I don't care, he said, his voice hardening. My dad told me what Brody and Croft did to your family. I can't be part of this. Not again. But I'm one deputy. My word against his. I'm a rookie. I'll be fired, and she'll still be in that van. He leaned in, his voice barely a breath. You said protocol. You know the rules. So you know I can't act without cause. But I am a witness. I'm a witness to him ignoring the head trauma. I'm a witness to him refusing to take her statement. I'm a witness to him colluding with the other party. He stepped back. I'm a witness, he repeated, but a witness is only useful if there's a case. Right now, he controls the case. You need to find a way to take that control from him. You need to do it before that van gets here. Evans, Brody's voice echoed across the room. What's taken so long? Evans flinched. He put his notepad away. Just confirming details, Sheriff, he called back. He turned to me, his face once again a mask of professional neutrality. Ma'am, if you'll just wait here, I'll have to ask you to leave the premises in a moment. He turned and started to lead Chloe back to the bench. He'd just handed me a lifeline, a ticking clock, a set of keys, and an ally. He'd just confirmed that Brody wasn't just lazy, he was actively, criminally, covering this up. And Evans would testify to it. But he was right. I needed something bigger. A witness to a procedural error was good. It might get the case thrown out in a week. It wouldn't stop that van. I needed a bomb. I needed something that would stop this now. I looked at Chloe, her face pale. I had 20 minutes to find one. 20 minutes. That was the deadline. 20 minutes before my daughter was fed into the machine, before she became just another number in a system I knew was designed to crush people like us. Evans was a witness, but a witness to what? A procedural error? Brody would swat that away like a fly, fire the kid for his trouble, and my daughter would still be in that van. I needed a bomb, and I had a sickening feeling Chloe knew exactly where it was. My legs felt like lead, but I forced them to move. I turned away from Deputy Evans, who was now nervously pretending to check the contents of a 3-ring binder. I walked back to Brody's desk. He looked up, his face a mask of pure annoyance. I thought I told you to wait by the door, Sarah. You're interfering. I am, I said. I had to play this perfectly. I let the hysterical mother he wanted to see come flooding back. I let my voice shake, let the tears I'd been holding back well up in my eyes. You're really going to do this? You're going to send her to county? Just like that. He sighed, a long, put-upon, theatrical sound. He was enjoying this. I'm not doing anything. She did this. It's procedure. But to say goodbye, I choked. To make sure she's coherent? You said she's hysterical. Don't you want me to calm her down? Or is that against your go-way-back protocol, too? I was baiting him, using his own words, daring him to be that needlessly, openly cruel. He stared at me for a long second, then waved his hand in disgust. He wanted me gone. Fine. 60 seconds, Sarah. That's it. Then you're out. Evans, he barked. Go with her. Stand right next to her. Make sure she doesn't pass her anything. I mean it. I want to see your hands. Evans, playing his part, walked over. He didn't pat me down, but he stood close. He unlocked Chloe's cuff from the bench. The sound of the metal teeth releasing was shockingly loud in the quiet room, but left her hands bound in front. He walked her the 3 feet to where I was standing. This was it, 60 seconds. I didn't hug her right away. I grabbed her shoulders. I needed her to see my face, to see past my fake tears. "Chloe, listen to me," I said, my voice loud enough for the room to hear. "Are you hurt anywhere else? Did he do anything else?" She was trembling, her eyes wide and glazed, a mask of terror that went beyond the gash on her head. "Mom," she whispered, her eyes darting to Mark, who was watching us like a hawk from across the room. He said he'd ruin me. He said he has. Pictures, videos, on his phone. He said his dad would. Shh, I said. Now. I pulled her into a hug, a fierce, desperate hug, my body shielding my words from the room. My mouth was right at her ear. Evans was standing so close I could feel the heat from his arm, but he was looking at his boss, playing the perfect guard. "The key," I whispered, so low it was just a breath. "The key. Where is the key?" For a second she tensed. She didn't understand. "Mom, what?" "The key, Chloe. The thing that unlocks it. You know what I'm talking about. Anything." Then I felt a shudder pass through her. She understood. The key was our code, ever since she was little. After her dad died, it was the game we played. "What's the key, sweetie? What's the one thing that will make this better?" Sometimes it was ice cream. Sometimes it was just a hug. She knew. She pulled back just enough to look at me, her eyes clearing for a split second, the fog of terror replaced by a spark of pure, focused rage. She whispered back, her voice desperate. "My laptop. In my car. The file. He called it the Phoenix Ledger." My blood went cold. The Phoenix Ledger. He'd stolen my father's symbol. The name of the worn, leather-bound book my father had kept for 30 years, a record of every person he'd helped, every small-town act of kindness, every debt he'd forgiven, every bit of good he'd put into the world. The book I still kept on my nightstand. He bragged about it. She rushed, the words tumbling out. All the money he was skimming from his dad's new development. He thought I was too stupid to understand. He thought it was funny, he said. He said it was his insurance policy against his own father. "Time's up, Sarah," Brody's voice boomed. "Get her back on the bench, Evans, and get that van on the radio again. Find out where it is." Evans gently touched Chloe's arm. I squeezed my daughter's shoulders, hard. "It's going to be okay," I said, loud enough for the room to hear. "I promise you, it ends tonight." I let Evans lead her back to the bench. I turned and walked straight to the front door. I didn't run. I didn't look back. "See? That wasn't so hard," Brody said to my back, his voice dripping with smug satisfaction. He thought he'd won. He thought I was leaving, defeated. I didn't answer. I pushed open the glass door and walked out into the cold night air, the gravel crunching under my feet. The 20-minute clock was ticking, skimming. Insurance policy. The Phoenix Ledger. He hadn't just assaulted my daughter. He'd mocked my family. He'd danced on my father's grave. I walked to Chloe's little blue sedan, parked right next to my truck. The key was in my bag, a spare she'd given me months ago after she'd locked herself out. I opened her passenger side, grabbed the gray laptop case, and zipped it open. The laptop was there. I stood there for a second, in the cold, flickering light of the broken sheriff sign. This was the bomb. But a bomb is useless if it blows up in your own hand. If I walked in and said, "This laptop has evidence of Mark's embezzlement," what would happen? Brody would seize it. It would vanish. It would be lost in evidence, corrupted, wiped clean, and Chloe would still be in that van. I couldn't tell them what it was. I had to show them. No. I had to make Brody show me. I had to use the one thing they'd given me, their arrogance. They thought I was a stupid, hysterical woman. They thought Chloe was a stupid, hysterical girl. They thought they were the only smart men in the room. It was time to prove them right. I walked back inside. The room went quiet. Brody, Mark, and Evans all stared at me. Brody's face darkened with rage. "I told you to leave, Sarah. That's it. "I'm going," I said, my voice trembling again. I was acting now. I was giving the performance of my life. I am, but I think you need this. I walked to the booking desk and placed the laptop gently on the counter, right in front of Sheriff Brody. He looked at the laptop, then at me. What is this? You bringing her homework? It's my daughter's computer, I said, letting a tear roll down my cheek. And I think you're right, Sheriff. I think Chloe is unstable. She hasn't been right. Not for a while. Mark, who had been looking bored, suddenly looked interested. He stepped closer. Brody's eyes narrowed, the anger replaced by a cautious curiosity. What are you talking about, Sarah? She's been writing things, I said, choking on a sob. Making things up. She's obsessed with Mark, with his family. She has a file on here. I tapped the laptop. She calls it the Phoenix Ledger. It's basically her diary. But it's sick. It's full of these crazy, paranoid delusions about Mark, about him, stealing, and about you. About you and Mr. Croft. I had him. His eyes flickered. He was interested. A diary, Brody scoffed, but he was reaching for it. And what? You think I'm going to read her diary? That's not evidence. It is if it proves her state of mind, I said, my voice rising in a perfect imitation of hysteria. It shows she's erratic, that she's capable of attacking him, just like he said. It'll help your case. It'll prove you were right about her. Mark was practically vibrating. Open it. I want to see what that crazy bitch wrote about me. Brody held up a hand. Now, hold on. I can't just go. Phishing in a computer, Sarah. That's procedure. But it's my computer. I lied, my heart pounding. She's 19, but she lives in my house. It's my property. I pay for it. I'm giving you my consent. As a concerned mother, I'm asking you to look at it. To help Mark. To help you understand what's wrong with her. It was perfect. I was the hysterical, betraying mother, throwing my own daughter under the bus. It was a story he understood. A story he wanted to believe. And the little bonus, a chance to see if Chloe knew anything about his own corrupt dealings, was too tempting to resist. He was arrogant, he was lazy, and he was corrupt. It was the perfect trap. Fine, he grunted. He grabbed the laptop, carried it over to his desk, and plugged it in. Evans, you stay here. Watch them. He sat down, his back to me. What's the password? Try Croft Family 1, I said. He typed. The computer unlocked. My heart skipped a beat. Of course. She was still a teenage girl in love, even as she was building a case against the man she loved. We watched his back. We saw his shoulders tense. He clicked. He scrolled. For a full, agonizing minute, the only sound in the room was the click, click, click of the mouse wheel. Mark started to look nervous. Brody, Mark said. What is it? What does it say? Brody didn't answer. He just kept scrolling. Then, he slammed the laptop shut. The sound was like a gunshot in the tiny, silent station. The sound was like a gunshot in the tiny, silent station. He stood up slowly, the legs of his cheap office chair scraping the tile. His face wasn't red with anger anymore. It was a waxy, sickly white. He looked like a man who'd just stepped on a landmine and hadn't heard the click yet. He looked afraid. Mark didn't get it. He was still living in his father's world, a world with padded walls and no consequences. What is it, Brody? What's in there? What'd that crazy bitch write? Brody's eyes darted to me, then to Evans, then back to the laptop, as if it were a venomous snake. It's nothing, he stammered. His voice was an octave too high. It's irrelevant. Just like she said. Crazy girl's diary. Gibberish. He tried to laugh, a dry, popping sound. She's obsessed. He reached to unplug the laptop, to close the loop, to make the snake disappear. His hand never made it. It's not gibberish, Sheriff. The words came out of me, and they didn't sound like my own. The hysterical mother was gone. The woman who was shaking and crying had evaporated. In her place was someone I hadn't heard from in 10 years. Someone cold. Someone patient. Someone who had spent a decade reading the fine print while he was getting fat on donuts and favors. You didn't find a diary, did you? I said. My voice cut through the stale, burnt coffee air. Mark stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. What is this? What's going on? Brody tried to regain control. Sarah, I told you to. You found a spreadsheet, I interrupted. He flinched as if I'd slapped him. A very detailed, very organized spreadsheet, with dates, account numbers, routing numbers, and transfer amounts. I took a step toward the desk. For the first time since I'd known him, Sheriff Brody took a step back. She called it the Phoenix Ledger, I said, and the name on my lips felt like righteous fire. My father used that name for his records. A ledger of every kindness he ever did. Mark here. He twisted it. He used it to document every single dollar he's been systematically embezzling from his father's company for the last 6 months. The same company that got that corrupt zoning deal that bankrupted my family. The truth landed. Mark's face went from smug to confused to nothing. Just pure, white-hot panic. He finally understood. You bitch! He screamed, a raw animal sound. He lunged, but he wasn't lunging at me. He was lunging at the desk, at the laptop. He was going to destroy it. He never made it. Deputy Evans, who had been standing by the wall, silent as a statue, moved. He didn't just move, he exploded. He intercepted Mark mid-air with a form tackle that sent them both crashing into a metal filing cabinet. The sound of the cabinet rattling and Mark's head hitting the metal was deafening. Get off me! Get off me! My father will have your job! Mark screamed, thrashing on the floor. Evans didn't hesitate. He put a knee in Mark's back, wrenched his arms behind him, and I heard the sharp zzz click of the handcuffs. You're under arrest for assault, Evans said, his voice shaking but firm. You have the right to remain silent. The station was suddenly, perfectly still. The only sound was Mark's ragged breathing on the floor. It was just me and Brody. He was frozen, staring at the scene. At his friend's son, cuffed on the floor by his own rookie. His whole, comfortable, corrupt world had just disintegrated in 30 seconds. This is inadmissible, he sputtered, pointing a shaking finger at the laptop. It's financial. It's not part of the domestic. You trapped me. This is entrapment. I didn't do anything, Sheriff, I said. I'm just a hysterical mother who brought you what you believed was evidence of her daughter's instability. You made the choice to look. Sheriff Brody, I said. My voice was loud now, sharp, commanding. He flinched, like a dog. Let's review the procedure. You just accessed a private, password-protected financial document. A document I identified to you, on the record, as a diary containing evidence for your case. I walked right up to the desk, right up to his face. You did it on an unsecured departmental computer. You did it without a warrant. You did it after the laptop's owner, my daughter, was in your custody. You did it without her consent. I leaned in. You did it, Sheriff, because you were arrogant. You thought you could bend the rules because you go way back. You did it because you were sloppy. And per County Procedural Code 9, for one long, agonizing second, there was no sound at all, just the hum of the fluorescent light overhead. Brody's shoulders went rigid. He didn't just tense up, he seized. I saw the muscles in his back bunch through his cheap polyester shirt. He knew. That was the click of the landmine. Then, he slammed the laptop shut. The sound was a flat, echoing crack. It was a sound of pure panic. He stood up, the legs of his cheap office chair scraping the tile. He turned around, and his face wasn't red with anger anymore. It was a waxy, sickly white. He looked like a man who'd just swallowed poison and was waiting for it to work. It's nothing, he stammered. His voice was an octave too high. It's irrelevant. Just like she said. Crazy girl's diary. Gibberish. He tried to laugh. It was a dry, popping sound, like a bug zapper. She's obsessed. This is all inadmissible. He fumbled for the power cord, his thick fingers shaking. He was going to unplug it, wipe it, make it disappear. He was going to bury the evidence and my daughter along with it. His hand never made it. It's not gibberish, Sheriff. My voice. It wasn't my voice. It wasn't the voice of Sarah, the hysterical mother, the grieving widow, the woman he'd been patting on the head for 10 years. This voice was cold. It was calm. It was the voice of a paralegal who had spent 3,000 nights reading procedural code in a dim apartment while her daughter slept, all for this one single second. The hysterical mother was gone. I let the mask dissolve. Brody froze, his hand hovering over the cord. Mark stopped smirking. He finally sensed that the weather in the room had changed. "You didn't find a diary, did you?" I said. I took a step away from the wall, into the center of the room. "What is this, Sarah? What's going on?" Mark said, his voice losing its edge, replaced by a whining confusion. Brody tried to regain control. "Sarah, I told you to—" "You found a spreadsheet," I interrupted. He flinched, as if I'd slapped him. A very detailed, very organized spreadsheet. With dates, account numbers, routing numbers, and transfer amounts. I took another step. Brody, for the first time since I'd known him, took a step back. "It's a complete ledger, isn't it?" I said, my voice cutting through the stale, burnt coffee air. "Of all the money Mark here has been systematically embezzling from his father's company for the last 6 months. Skimming right off the top of that new development. The Ridgeway project." Mark's face went from smug to confused to nothing. Just pure, white-hot panic. "You used it as a title for your own pathetic, greedy little list of crimes. You didn't just assault my daughter. You desecrated my father's memory." This is inadmissible," Brody finally sputtered. He was finding his footing, falling back on the words he knew. "It's financial. It has nothing to do with the domestic. You trapped me. This is entrapment. Entrapment." I let out a short, bitter laugh. Entrapment is when an officer coerces someone into committing a crime they wouldn't have otherwise committed. You, Sheriff? You sprinted into this crime all on your own. You were so sure I was a stupid, hysterical woman. You were so sure my daughter was a liar. You were so eager to protect your friend's kid that you couldn't wait to bend the rules. "Let's review the procedure, Sheriff," I said, using his own word against him. I was a paralegal. This was my ground. I walked right up to the desk, right up to his face. 1. You, a sworn officer, accessed a private, password-protected laptop. 2. You did it after the owner of that laptop, my daughter, was in your custody and cuffed to a bench. 3. You did it without a warrant. And you did it without her consent. I leaned in, and my voice dropped to a whisper. "I told you it was a diary to prove she was unstable. I gave you my consent as a concerned mother, which legally means less than nothing. You chose to look. Why? You weren't investigating her assault. You were looking for blackmail. You were looking for dirt on me, on her, and on your good friend Robert Croft, just in case. You weren't investigating a crime, Sheriff. You were committing one." He was barely breathing. "Per County Procedural Code 9. 4B, I said, and I could see the dusty, 3-ring binder in my mind's eye, the page I had photocopied a dozen times. Evidence handling and chain of custody. What you just did? Accessing potential evidence on an unsecured departmental computer without a warrant, contaminating the entire chain of custody? That has a name." I let the silence hang for one beautiful, terrible second. "It's called evidence tampering. It's a Class 4 felony." Brody's knees seemed to buckle. He grabbed the desk for support. "And," I said, turning my head slightly, "Deputy Evans, the rookie you've been bullying and threatening all night, the one you ordered to violate protocol, he's standing right there." I pointed. "He just witnessed every second of it. He witnessed you take the bait. He witnessed you commit a felony. You just handed him your career, Sheriff. You just handed me your badge. You just handed me your badge." The words hung in the stale, fluorescent air. They didn't echo. They just landed. Heavy. Final. The station, which had been buzzing with my panic and Brody's bluster, went utterly, completely silent. I could hear the whir of the ancient computer tower on Evans's desk. I could hear the thump, thump, thump of my own blood in my ears. Brody was a statue. His hand was still hovering over the laptop's power cord. His face, which had been a waxy white, was now turning a blotchy, mottled gray. His eyes were the most telling. They weren't angry. They weren't afraid. They were calculating. He was looking at Deputy Evans. He was weighing 10 years of go way back favors against a Class 4 felony and a rookie witness. He was running the odds. And he was coming up empty. Mark Croft was the one who didn't get it. He was still living in his father's world, a world where men like Brody were the lions, and men like him were the cubs, and people like me were just food. He saw his protector falter. He saw his world tilt. He saw me, the hysterical, high-strung woman, standing there, not crying, not yelling, just watching, and he snapped. It wasn't a calculation. It was pure, spoiled animal rage. You bitch!" he screamed, his voice cracking like a pubescent boy's. He didn't lunge at me. He didn't lunge at Brody. He lunged at the desk, at the laptop, at my father's stolen legacy, the evidence that had just ended his charmed life. He never made it. Deputy Evans had been standing by the wall, a coiled spring of adrenaline and fear. The second Mark moved, Evans exploded. He wasn't little Davy Evans anymore. He wasn't a rookie. He was a cop. He met Mark midair. It wasn't a tackle. It was a collision. A solid, brutal thud of bodies. Evans, using Mark's own momentum, spun him around and slammed him, face first, into the drywall next to the filing cabinet. A cloud of plaster dust puffed into the air. "Get off me! Get off me!" Mark shrieked, his voice muffled by the wall. "My father will have your job. He'll end you. You're under arrest for assault." Evans's voice was a roar. It was a voice I'd never heard, a voice full of all the frustration and anger he'd been swallowing. He put a knee in the small of Mark's back, wrenched the arm that didn't have the fake bandage up high, and I heard the sound. The most beautiful sound in the world. Zizzit, 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 C-L-I-C-K. The sound of handcuffs locking. Evans was breathing hard, his own adrenaline dumping. He hauled Mark to his feet, shoved him into the plastic chair Chloe had just vacated, and leaned in. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney." He was reading him his rights. He was doing it by the book. The tables hadn't just turned. They had been smashed to pieces. Now, there was a new standoff. Me, standing by the desk. Mark, cuffed and sobbing in a chair. And Evans, standing between his prisoner and his sheriff. Brody. Brody had collapsed. He hadn't been hit. He hadn't been touched, but he'd fallen back into his chair. He was a puppet whose strings had been cut. He looked old. He looked like my father did in those last few months. Defeated. He looked at the laptop. His hand twitched. "Don't," Evans said. His voice was quiet now, but it was steel. "Don't touch the computer." Brody froze. He was being given an order by his own rookie, and he was taking it. Evans walked past him, his eyes never leaving his boss. He unplugged the laptop's power cord, closed the lid with a gentle thud, and tucked the computer under his arm. He was securing the evidence. He was securing my father's ledger. The whole thing was over. The 20-minute clock was gone. The transfer van didn't matter. The good old boy network was broken. And then, I remembered. I turned. Chloe was still on the bench, her hands still cuffed in front of her. She was staring, wide-eyed, as if she'd just woken from a nightmare. Her face was pale, streaked with blood and tears. Evans saw me look. He holstered his taser, which I hadn't even seen him draw. He walked over to Chloe, his face softening. "Ma'am," he said, his voice gentle again. "Chloe." He took the key from his belt. I heard another click, a different click, a sound of release. The cuffs fell away from her wrists. Chloe didn't move for a second. She just looked at her hands, red and raw from the metal. Then I was moving. I crossed the room in 2 strides and fell to my knees in front of her. I grabbed her, and she collapsed against me, burying her face in my shoulder, and for the first time that night, she let out a real sob. Not a gasp of fear, but a wail of pain and relief and sheer, bone-deep exhaustion. I just held her. I smoothed her hair, stained and matted. "It's over, baby," I whispered. "I got you. It's over." I held her for a long time. I could feel Mark's eyes on us, full of hate. I could feel Brody's. Empty. Finally, I looked up. Evans was standing there, holding the laptop. He looked like a man who had just walked through fire and wasn't sure what to do next. I got to my feet, pulling Chloe up with me. She leaned on me, and I held her tight. I was no longer a paralegal. I wasn't a victim. I was a mother, and I was in charge. I looked at Deputy Evans. "Evans," I said, and my voice was clear and steady. "First, you're going to call paramedics and get an ambulance here for my daughter's head injury. You will file a report detailing her injuries and my initial complaint." He nodded, his eyes wide. Yes, ma'am. Second, I said, you are going to place Mark Croft in a holding cell. You are going to process him for the assault on my daughter. The cut on his arm. I glanced at the perfect, clean bandage. Looks self-inflicted. I want it photographed and documented as such. Yes, ma'am. Third, I said, pointing to the man who was still a ghost in his chair. You are not to let Sheriff Brody out of your sight. You are not to let him make a single phone call. And you are not to let him touch that computer. That laptop is evidence. Not just of Mark's embezzlement, but of a Class 4 felony committed by your superior officer. I took a breath. Which brings me to fourth. You are not calling county. You are not calling the dispatch you're used to. You are going to use your personal cell phone, and you are going to call the state police. Tell them you've witnessed an active duty sheriff commit evidence tampering. Tell them you have the evidence in your possession. Tell them you're at the county station, and you and 2 civilians are not safe. Deputy Evans, holding my father's Phoenix ledger, looked at his boss, looked at me, and stood up straight. Yes, ma'am, he said. I'll make the call right now. Deputy Evans didn't hesitate. He pulled out his personal cell phone, turned his back on his boss, a final, stunning act of defiance, and walked toward the front door for a better signal, his voice low and urgent. Yes, this is Deputy Evans, badge 319. I'm at the county sheriff's station. I'm requesting immediate state police assistance. I have an active duty sheriff. I have Sheriff Brody, committing an active felony. Evidence tampering. I have the evidence secured. I have 2 civilians, the victims, and 1 suspect in custody. Send a car. Now. He hung up. The station was silent again, but it was a different silence. It wasn't tension, it was a vacuum. The power had been sucked out of the room. Brody was still in his chair, a ghost in polyester. He was a hollowed-out man. He watched his career end him with a simple phone call. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at Mark. He just stared at the empty space where Evans had stood. Mark was sobbing. Not the loud, angry screams of before, but the ugly, gulping, hiccuping sobs of a child who'd been told no for the very first time. His arrogance had shattered, and there was just this pathetic, weak thing underneath, cuffed to a plastic chair. I was still holding Chloe. I could feel her whole body shaking, a deep, bone-rattling tremor of shock and adrenaline. "It's okay, baby," I whispered, rubbing her back. "It's really over. I got you." The wail of sirens started in the distance. Not the slow, familiar county siren. This was the sharp, piercing cry of the state police, and they were coming fast. The front door burst open again. 2 paramedics, dispatched by Evans from his cell, came in fast, their faces all business. "Who's the victim?" the first one asked. Evans pointed. "Her, Miss Hayes, 19 years old, visible, head laceration, signs of concussion and strangulation marks. He jerked a thumb at Mark, is the suspect. He's also claiming a head injury from the arrest. We'll take her first," the paramedic said, kneeling in front of Chloe. "Hi, Chloe. My name's Rick. We're going to take a look at you, okay?" As they gently started to check her pupils and cut the matted hair away from the gash, Evans walked over to me. He was shaking, just slightly, the adrenaline wearing off. He looked at the laptop, which he'd placed on his own desk, a bomb now safely contained. "My God," he whispered, his voice full of a ragged awe. He's done. Robert Croft is. They're all done. That ledger. It's not just embezzlement. It's wire fraud. It's everything." He looked at me, really looked at me, as if seeing me for the first time, not as Sarah, not as Chloe's mom. Who are you?" he asked, his voice low. Are you a lawyer? Are you with the Attorney General? How did you know? How did you know he'd take the bait? How did you know code 9, 4B? He was searching for a box to put me in, a title, a position of power that would make sense of what just happened. I shook my head. I watched the paramedic gently clean my daughter's face. "No, deputy," I said, my voice quiet, "just for him. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a judge. I'm just a paralegal from the next county over." I looked over at Brody, at the man who had dismissed me, who had called me high-strung and emotional and unstable. "And I'm the woman your boss and his friends bankrupted 10 years ago," I said. I'm just the one who bothered to read the fine print. They count on us not reading it. They count on us being too scared, too tired, too emotional to see the trap. I turned back to Evans, who had just saved my daughter's life by choosing a side. They forgot that a mother with nothing to lose has nothing to lose. You did good, Davy. He stared at me, and I could see the moment he understood. The moment he realized power didn't always come from a badge or a bank account. Sometimes it came from a binder. He looked at me, and I could see the moment he understood. The moment he realized power didn't always come from a badge or a bank account. Sometimes it came from a binder. And sometimes it comes from a rookie cop who, in that one crucial moment, decides to be the man his parents raised him to be. The wail of the state police sirens got louder, a piercing, sharp sound that was nothing like Brody's familiar, wheezing county siren. It was the sound of a different league. It was the sound of consequence. 2 state troopers, ramrod straight in their gray and blue uniforms and campaign hats, pushed through the door. They didn't bluster. They didn't chat. They just assessed. Their eyes swept the room in a single, cold, efficient pass. Chloe and me by the wall, the paramedics working on her. Mark, cuffed and sobbing in the chair. Brody, a gray, hollowed-out ghost behind his desk. And finally, Deputy Evans, standing at attention, holding the laptop like it was a holy relic. "Who's in charge here?" the lead trooper asked, his voice flat. "I am, sir," Evans said. His voice was shaking, but he stood his ground. "Deputy Evans," I called. "This is the suspect, Mark Croft, in custody for domestic assault." "And him?" the trooper asked, jerking his chin at Brody. Brody tried to stand up. "Now, listen, Captain, this is all just a misunderstanding. This woman, she's hysterical. Sir," Evans said, cutting his own boss off, "that is Sheriff Brody. I have him on a 9-4B, evidence tampering. He's the one I called about. I witnessed it. It's a Class 4 felony." The trooper looked at Brody. He didn't yell. He didn't posture. He just unclipped his radio. "Dispatch, I've got a situation at the county station. Send a second unit and notify the state investigator. I've got an officer-involved felony." He clicked the radio off and looked at Brody with a kind of bored disappointment. "Sheriff," he said, his voice quiet, "I need you to stand up, slowly. Place your service weapon and your badge on the desk, right now." The good old boy network, that thick, invisible shield that had protected him for 20 years, just evaporated. It wasn't real. It was just a story they told each other. Faced with real, procedural, by-the-book authority, it crumbled. Brody, his hands trembling, unbuckled his heavy belt. The thud of the gun and the metallic clink of the badge hitting the desk was the last sound his career ever made. Just then, the front doors burst open again. This time it was Robert Croft, Mark's father. He was in an expensive suit, his hair perfectly coiffed, but his face was a mask of panic. He'd clearly gotten a call from Mark. "What in God's name is going on here?" he boomed, pulling out his pillar of the community voice. "Mark, what have they done to you? Brody, what is this?" He zeroed in on the lead trooper. "Son, I'm Robert Croft. I know the governor. You are making a very big mistake." The trooper didn't even turn. He just put a hand up. "Sir, this is an active crime scene. You need to wait outside." "I will not." "Outside, now, or I'll arrest you for interference." Croft's mouth opened and closed. It was like a fish suffocating on air. He was used to his name, his money, meaning something. Here, it meant less than nothing. It meant he was a problem. He was just a man in a suit being told what to do. I watched him back out the door, his face purple with rage. His power was gone. Evans, his duty done, walked over to a state investigator who had just arrived. He handed over the laptop. "This is the evidence, sir. The Phoenix Ledger." He handed over his own notepad. "And these are my notes." The investigator took the laptop and slid it into a silver, static-proof evidence bag, zipping it shut. The bomb was now disarmed, and in the right hands. Evans walked back over to me, while the paramedics helped Chloe onto a gurney. They'll take it from here, ma'am," he said, the adrenaline finally leaving him. He looked exhausted. "The state will handle the prosecution, for all of it." "Thank you, Deputy," I said, putting my hand on his arm. You saved her life. You know that, right?" "No, ma'am," he said, looking at the floor. "Your dad, he saved mine. Once. I just paid it back." You see, that's the thing they never count on. They count on you being too tired, too scared, too emotional. They count on you not knowing the rules. They build their whole rotten world on the idea that we're all too busy, too beaten down, to read the fine print. Men like Brody, men like the Crofts, they run on arrogance. It's their fuel. They think their power comes from who they know, from their golf games and their country club handshakes. They think their connections make them immune. But that arrogance, it's their one fatal weakness. It makes them sloppy. It makes them lazy. It makes them believe that a hysterical woman, a grieving widow, a struggling single mom is just static, noise, someone to be handled, to be settled down. They forget that a mother's hysteria is just passion with nowhere to go. They forget that our emotion is what makes us pay attention. It's what makes us memorize the names, the dates, the procedural codes in a dusty binder. It's what gives us the strength to stay up for 3,000 nights, studying, while the rest of the world sleeps. They forget that real power isn't in a badge or a bank account. It's in what you know, and it's in why you know it. I drove Chloe home from the hospital just as the sun was starting to burn the fog off the fields. She had 6 stitches above her temple, a purple and black bruise on her neck, and a prescription for painkillers. She was asleep in the passenger seat of my old truck, her face finally in repose. I watched that orange sun climb the sky, and I thought about my father's ledger, the real one, the one sitting on my nightstand, its leather cover cracked with age, its pages filled with his elegant script, a record of a life well lived. Mark Croft had tried to steal that name, to twist its meaning from kindness to corruption, but he couldn't. He didn't understand what it meant. He didn't understand that my father's legacy wasn't just a hardware store. It was me. It was Chloe. It was the iron will he'd passed down. He thought he was just stealing money. He had no idea he was picking a fight with a ghost. That's the fine print they'll never ever read. So, let me ask you, if the system is designed to make you fail, if it's counting on you to be too tired and too scared to fight, would you have the courage to find the fine print? If this story resonated with you, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about finding strength and justice in the hardest of times.